Valheim, an early access survival sim set in a Viking theme. As of this week, this game has sold 2 million copies and it's reviewing incredibly well, while also blowing up all over YouTube and Twitch. You might be wondering, if you've not really looked into it, what's going on with this game. After all, there's nothing unique about it. It's a survival sim with a bloody Viking theme. But where it is unique is that it's an early access game that actually works incredibly well, in fact. From the crafting, the building, the combat, the exploration, the survival mechanics or otherwise, it is all very standard. It's all been done before. But never have I played a game that's in early access that does it all this well and actually functions to this level. The bar in this genre is clearly low, but when someone does it right, we all seem to appreciate it very much because this is a very fun genre of game. My name is Hollow and this is the brutal truth about Valheim. Let's do this by discussing the main aspects of the game and how it does them very right, despite not really doing anything special or unique. This is perfectly showcased by the combat of the game, I think, so we'll start with that. You've got melee weapons, the shields, and ranged weapons. Using melee, you've got things like infinite swinging, 3-hit combos, or some unique attacks with unique weapons, like say the Stag Breaker, which is made from core wood and deer trophies and is this big Chad hammer that does AoE damage for group combat. So while there are some unique options for melee, that is mostly it. For bows, you've got drawing and aiming, and the longer you hold, the more accurate you are. There's also weight fall off, which is definitely noticeable, which becomes easier and better with higher quality bows. For variety in this case, you've got arrows that you'll craft, feathering them for extra damage, or say creating fire arrows for damage over time. When it comes to defensive options, you can block attacks, roll to avoid them, or even parry using some weapons and certain shield types, which will stagger a foe and make them take extra damage briefly. And that's it for the combat. It is simple, it is functional, and it's pretty bland and not that exciting. Where Valheim is more exciting with that combat is through the enemies you face. Enemies like the wild boar, the skeletons, the grey dwarfs, the giant trolls, or small neckfish, and so on. These are all just early game enemies, which come in lots of different types, like the shaman, who can poison you or heal its allies. The brutes, which are essentially bigger and stronger versions. Various melee or ranged users, and so on to deal with. Just in the start of the game, you will face a lot of variety in these enemies and lots to think about. And then with the tier system added in as well, you've got various star levels of enemies, like an elite system. So a 1-star troll is going to be much more scary and deadlier than a no-star troll. Ultimately, the combat is very basic. You have a tiny selection of options for attacking and defending. Things are mostly interesting with the enemies and how they're going to attempt to defeat you. It still feels great and often looks great, like maybe when I'm kiting a troll through a forest and it's trying to hit me and it's accidentally cleaving trees asunder and I'm now having to dodge those as they're falling down. The fun of combat is built up on the world and surviving it, much less on what you can actually do and how repetitive that actually is. While we're talking simple and not so unique, we move on to crafting. A straightforward system you've seen in other survival crafting games. You'll start with very little and then gather some resources. Then with those resources like wood or stone, you craft yourself some tools. Using those tools, you get better resources, which then unlocks new ways to refine those resources into more useful things. Structures for safety, equipment like weapons and clothing, or varied equipment like hoes to start farming. From there, it'll scale and scale as you continue to unlock new crafting ability by gathering more using the highest tier of equipment that you've unlocked. Bog standard, done 1,000 times, but all the same, it works and it feels good. Working your way to the next tier of ability, which in turn pushes you to search for better, encouraging you to explore the world and encounter new enemies and new things. There's also upgrading items as well, which allows you to say take a bronze pickaxe and then use relevant resources to take it from a 1-star to a 2-star in quality, slightly improving its use, and you can do that with basically everything. Now, building in Valheim takes the standard route of providing you with a tool that allows building, in this case the wooden hammer, and then gives you a wide range of choices for building, be it a wall or a door, a roof piece or a fence. There's lots of nice extra options like different angled roofing or many half versions of other parts, letting you get a little bit more creative with your design. It is a little clunky at the best of times, however, and we don't have useful things like the shift key in Minecraft, which would let us hang off the side of things safely to get the right angle on stuff. And while it does have a bit of a lacking design mode in that way, it has a cool mechanic that comes with structural integrity. You see, you can't just build a weird floating house, it has to be grounded correctly and supported correctly, otherwise it will just break. By using the pillars, you support, say, the roofing of your structure, creating beams and rafters that correctly hold up its shape, which is telegraphed by the colours you can see while building. If the unit you're looking at is green, well then you're good to go, it's safe and sound. If it's in yellow, you should really think about fixing its integrity, and if it's red, well that's going to break. This simple concept means you have to think about how your structure will be supported before it's even finished, and my friends on their server showcased that to me well here with their designs. You see how they've created a spine for the building out of these pillars and then built around that. Well, that's how it's meant to be done. So while the building can be a bit clunky, like trying to build anything underwater, it does have an interesting and more involved requirement to its structures, and I can see them improving the build mode in the future. The world of Valheim is actually like Minecraft, as we were saying. You load up a new world, and as you do, an entirely new landscape is generated for you. It comes with its own seed, which you can share with others if you want them to try your world, if you've got something unique or whatever. But it's all laid out on this massive circular level. Confirmed, by the way, the Earth is flat. I've seen it. It's in Valheim. Essentially, it's an incredibly large landscape to go out and explore. Inside of that are many biomes that are pressed up against each other, starting you out in a meadow always for safety, and then steadily getting more dangerous and harder to survive in as you enter things like the Black Forest, the mountains, or journey across the massive oceans or into the swamps and so on, all requiring different equipment to get different things as you progress and achieve the next tier of crafting. Out there in that world, you might find dungeons, which are essentially cave systems that hide important items like the stones you'll use for smelting bars of metal, or even creating portals for fast travel. To traverse the great mass of water you'll find out there, we have various levels of boats, from rafts to longships, using rows or wind to speed you along the waterways. What's pretty cool about the boats is how you can have multiple people on them, perfectly functional, and they've got fun little set positions for the crew, like holding onto the mast or standing up front, all majestic. When in control and steering the ship, you have 3 levels of speed. Rowing or by wind, you need to think about the direction of the wind shown on the right, using the wind to push you at great speed where possible, or rowing if you're going against the wind if you have to. Just like everything in Valheim, it is simple, it is functional, and it's fun. There's extra nice things like the ability to make markers by placing and labeling them to keep track of where important things you found are, or ping a location so you can let others know where you are, what you're looking at, or maybe just orientate yourself as you travel. These are some nice details to have in an early access game like this one. But it's time we talk about what I think might be the elephant in the room, the visuals. Look at this thing. Look at this dude. This dude is from 2004 with the most hideous, low textured details I've seen in a game in a long time. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry when I saw this. Look at it! Opening shot is like perfect, ooh, mystical Viking vibes. Very good. And then we just like look at the game. Look at it. Look at that guy's cape. It's got about 2 pixels. The textures are so awful, but the lighting, look at the lighting. Look at the lighting. Why are the textures so bad? Don't let the visuals trick you into thinking poorly of it though. As I clearly saw in my initial impressions there, the lighting effects are incredible. The weather constantly shifts and flows from wind to rain, bright sun or creepy darkness. The magical effects from various enemies or the crashing waves out on the sea. It's both terrible and phenomenal visually. You could be pressing through a claustrophobic dungeon, wary of whatever lurks around the corner. You could be sprinting across an open green field, enjoying the sunlight, being chased around the black woods in the dark by monsters, whatever. It's an incredibly stylized world that's pretty wonderful to be in, even if, yes, God, those textures can be horrible. I mean, I love old school RuneScape and always return to that, and that's a game that's almost 2 decades old at this point, and the visuals are very dated. Clearly, visuals don't make a game bad. A bad game makes a game bad. Valheim showcases just how little impressive textures actually matter if they know how to make a fun and inviting world. The setting or theme for Valheim is of course Viking natured, in that you, a slain warrior, has had their soul ferried to Valheim, the 10th Norse world. In this mystical land, you're under constant threat of creatures of chaos and enemies of the gods. Your goal and task here is actually quite simple. Go slay the ancient rivals of Odin and bring order to the realm. Alright, not easy, but simple. Upon landing at your spawn point, you'll be greeted with this rather ominous stone circle dedicated to various enemies of Odin. These are actually the foes you need to slay as an overhead objective. To begin with, you'll be shown your first target, this demon-like deer with lightning powers. No big deal, just a tutorial boss after all, which can be defeated with a simple bow and arrow as long as you're careful. Somewhat visually impressive considering the other textures of this game, the boss fights can be pretty nuts. By defeating the boss and gathering its trophy, you will then unlock new progression. So the first boss provides you with materials to get you a pickaxe, and then that unlocks mining, which is a rare potential when it comes to metalwork and crafting. You could actually compare this system to, say, Terraria, another boss hunting survival game if you've played that. Plus, if you bring that trophy back to those spawn stones and place it at the appropriate stone, you're able to activate new god powers for new benefits. The first one being a temporary stamina and energy buff, perfect for exploration as you sprint around the land. But as you go on to find the locations of the next bosses and challenge them, things get steadily scarier and certainly more dangerous. The bosses will have new themes and abilities which they will use more and more aggressively. If you aren't properly equipped to challenge them, you should expect to die. They do a lot of damage and can easily catch you out with their spells or attacks. Survival in Valheim is pretty generic. Keep yourself fed, don't go into a cold place without suitable protection, armor yourself for combat to reduce damage, gather food through cooking meats or farming vegetables. But what's a little bit interesting about Valheim is its food system. At the bottom left you can see these 3 slots for different food. That is your diet. Apparently, even in a survival situation, your Viking refuses to have an unbalanced diet. He will not eat another berry until that berry is fully digested. So you better find him different kinds of meat, different kinds of vegetable, different drinks to have. He needs variety or he will let himself die. What a drama queen. Eating restores health over time and provides you with extra stamina, which is very important. But also when you rest at things like a fire or in a safe place, you get different levels of comfort, which also affects stamina positively. So being rested before going out on a long journey can be quite important. While on top of all of that, you have the skills of your character progressing too. Say using bows over and over, you get better at using bows. By running a lot, you'll get better at running. So over time, your character becomes a bit of a powerhouse at the things you do the most, which can be a neat system for co-op if you wanted people to use specific weapons and fill specific roles long term. Speaking of co-op, this is the last thing I want to talk about. This game is perfect for co-op survival. You can play it alone if you want to, that's entirely viable. I started that way. But in co-op, the monsters and bosses will scale based on the amount of players involved, so things are suitably scaled for solo too. But if you do choose to play in co-op, you can play with up to 10 players at one time. Interestingly, the devs do suggest a group of 3 to 5 players when playing co-op, so it seems running around in a big unit of 10 may make things a bit trivial despite the scaling system they've attempted. In my experience, I found it awkward to join my friends who've been playing for a week prior to me because they're well ahead of me in progression. So I've kind of hopped onto the same server with them and built up my own little base away from them, interacting when we work together to overcome a boss or do something together. But I'm careful to avoid taking handouts. You see, if they gave me something and it was new to me, it'd suddenly give me all the recipes that I haven't unlocked linked to that thing, kind of ruining my progression, which is a major point of a game like this. Certainly something to be aware of. I would suggest playing the game in a smaller group, as the devs suggest, while maintaining somewhat similar levels of progression to each other without leaving people behind. That could ruin the game for someone, and it does force me to play mostly on my own while I try to catch up with my friends, which I don't mind so much, but you might. Oh, and yeah, there is PvP in the game if all players toggle it on, but it's mostly for messing around, not serious combat. It really does not work well. This game is clearly more focused on PvE. So in conclusion, Valheim. A generic concept in a saturated genre of game in a pretty recently overdone theme at that with Vikings. It's even got pretty dated visuals and all the odds are stacked against it to not be a popular game. But despite all of that, it is one of the very best survival games I've ever played, and I'm in the process of thoroughly enjoying both solo and with friends. For an early access game, it stands above the rest and is a bit of a shining beacon of how early access should be done. A well-functional game, ready to be played, using the early access to take feedback, to improve and add to the game, not test if it even bloody works in the first place at the expense of your money. This is early access done right, a survival sim done right. This is a very good game, and I definitely recommend it. That's the brutal truth about Valheim for me. I hope this was useful, or an interesting video at least. If you did enjoy it or got some use out of it, please drop a like. It really helps me out, and I'd love to make more videos like this when I can. In any case, Thanks for watching. I've been Hollow, you've been you, and I'll see you next time.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.